Buongiorno and welcome to the European Review, a broadcast on all things European culture. Today we'll be talking about Italy right now and how fascism affects music, education, and culture, and why that's important considering the broader picture. First, the background.
Fascism is a political ideology that imposes strict social and economical measures as a method of empowering the government and stripping citizens of rights. This authoritative system of government is usually headed by an absolute dictator who keeps citizens suppressed via acts of violence and strict laws that govern the people. Italian fascism is rooted in Italian nationalism, revolutionary syndicalism, and the desire to restore and expand Italian territories, which Italian fascists deemed necessary for a nation to assert its superiority and strength, and to avoid succumbing to decay.
As we all know, Italy is a totalitarian nation under the control of Benito Mussolini, who suppresses the arts, media, and music if it does not support the national agenda. For Italian children, this censorship begins in the classroom.
Fascist Italy's first Minister of Education, Giovanni Gentile, proposed that the state's education policy should focus on the indoctrination of students into fascism instead of actual academics, and so teachers should focus on educating youth to respect and be obedient to authority. In 1929, education policy took a major step towards total indoctrination. The government took control of the authorization of all textbooks.
All secondary school teachers were required to take an oath of loyalty to fascism. Children began to be taught that they owed the same loyalty to fascism as they did to God.
In 1933, all university teachers were required to be members of the National Fascist Party. From the 1930s to 1940s, Italy's education focused on the history of Italy, displaying Italy as a force of civilization during the Roman era, displaying the rebirth of Italian nationalism and the struggle for Italian independence and unity during the Risorgimento. Italy was also focused on raising the literacy rates of the Italian people to elevate Italy to the level of other European nations. Thus, intelligence was valued greatly in fascist Italy, and Italians were rewarded for being particularly intelligent. Italy did not start teaching anti-Semitism in schools until their alliance with Germany and the beginning of the anti-Semitist regime in Italy. Fascism also had a huge impact on literature and the arts, as the effort to subdue the people extended to suppressing their creativity and opposition. 10 years after the Italian fascists had come to power, fascism began to influence the arts, later known as the mystic of fascism. This involved the controlled use of art as a propaganda tool. By 1938, Castelnuovo Tedesco's music was eliminated from radio, and performances were cancelled, all prior to the announcement of the official anti-Semitic laws. During the first 15 years of the fascist regime, starting in 1922, Italian Jews were left unmolested, and many of them were enthusiastic supporters of Mussolini. Numbers of well-known German Jewish musicians who suddenly found themselves eliminated from musical life at home were welcomed in Italy. Mussolini had begun to believe that a war between the fascist states and the feeble European democracies was inevitable, and that an alliance with Germany was Italy's best option. Italian Jews began to be oppressed and deprived of their civil rights, jobs, and property. Under the severe stress of changed political conditions after World War I, literature declined significantly in Italy. Many poets of the wartime generation, weary of tradition and rhetoric, had begun seeking new expression. This resulted in a style of notably obscure poetry, which compensated poets for the loss of influence in a society subservient to dictatorship by turning them into elites, and allowed some, notably Eugenio Montal, to express their pessimism covertly. This was part of a movement called Hermeticism, or Hermetismo. Although fascist Italy did censor its literature, and the fascist rule was hardly conducive to creativity, in the dark picture there were a few glimmers of light. In addition to the changes in poetry, there also came changes in literature. For example, Italo Svevo's Conscienza di Zeno, or The Confessions of Zeno, was published in 1923, and it was considered a gem of psychological observation and Jewish humor. The surreal writings of Massimo Bontempelli and of Dino Buzzati were perhaps in part an escape from the prevailing political climate, but they stand up artistically nonetheless. Riccardo Bocelli produced historical narrative writing of lasting quality. Despite the presence of such intellectuals within Italy, censorship in Italy was still on the rise. The main goals of censorship in Italy were to control the public appearance of the regime, to constantly check the public opinion, and to create a national and local archive in which each citizen was filed and classified depending on their ideas, habits, relationships, and any shameful acts or situations which had arisen. In this way, censorship was used as an instrument for the creation of a police state in fascist Italy. That's it for this week's episode of the European Review. Come back next week, and good night.